The stars had always felt distant. For centuries, humanity looked up at them with wonder, imagining voices, imagining visitors, imagining that one day, something out there might answer back. Stories were written about first contact, about friendship, about discovery. No one imagined it would begin like this. It happened in a single moment. 1 second, the sky was clear. The next, it was gone. Massive silver disks filled the atmosphere, stretching across the horizon like artificial moons. They moved without sound at first, blocking out the sun, casting entire cities into shadow. For 3 seconds, the world watched. Then the beams fired. They didn't fall like bombs. They cut. Lines of white-hot energy carved through skyscrapers, splitting them in half as if they were made of paper. Chicago collapsed into itself. Paris turned to glass as entire districts melted under plasma heat. Oceans near the coasts began to boil, sending steam into the air like the planet itself was burning. Satellites vanished before they could send warnings. In less than an hour, global communication was gone. In less than a day, over 1 billion people were dead. Governments tried to respond. Missiles launched. Jets scrambled. Defense systems activated. None of it mattered. The alien ships didn't dodge. They didn't maneuver. They simply continued. Systematically. Efficiently. As if nothing below them could change the outcome. Bunkers filled with leaders became tombs. Emergency broadcasts turned into static. Cities that had taken centuries to build disappeared in minutes. Humanity wasn't being invaded. It was being erased. And through it all, the ships said nothing. High above the planet, within one of the silent vessels, the invaders observed. The Krix Empire did not see an enemy. They saw data, oxygen levels, water reserves, mineral density, biological mass. To them, Earth was not a civilization. It was inventory, a resource-rich world ready to be harvested. They moved in perfect coordination. Each ship followed its assigned pattern with absolute precision. Infrastructure was targeted first: power grids, water systems, transportation networks. Not to defeat humanity, to remove its ability to function. Where resistance appeared, it was eliminated instantly. Fighter jets were cut apart mid-air. Naval fleets burned across open oceans. Military bases vanished before their personnel even realized they were under attack. By the second day, organized resistance no longer existed. Humanity fractured. Small groups scattered into mountains, forests, underground shelters. Anywhere the alien eyes could not fully reach. The sky remained full. Always full. There was no night anymore. Only shadow. The planet itself seemed to choke on smoke and silence. Then the attack slowed. Not out of mercy. Out of calculation. According to the Krix projections, the remaining human population no longer posed a threat. Scattered survivors would die on their own, without infrastructure, without coordination, without hope. Earth was marked as 90% cleared. Efficient enough. The ships shifted into orbit, maintaining position while smaller units deployed to the surface. The next phase had begun. Harvesting. They believed they had won. That the story of humanity had already ended. What they did not measure, what they could not understand, was what remained. Not cities, not systems, not order. Something older, something far more dangerous. Because humanity had not disappeared. It had only been broken. And in the silence that followed the destruction, something began to form in the ashes. Not organized, not planned, but inevitable. The kind of response that does not ask if survival is possible, only how much it is willing to sacrifice to achieve it. The Krix believed the war was over. They had no idea they had just started something far worse. The mountains did not burn the way the cities had. Smoke reached them, thick, gray, carrying the smell of everything that had once been alive. But the fire never fully took hold. The terrain was too broken, the forests too dense, the air too thin for the kind of destruction that had swallowed the rest of the world. That was why they came. At first, it was just a few. A soldier with no unit. A woman carrying a child who hadn't spoken in days. A man who had walked for miles without remembering how he got there. They arrived one by one, then in pairs, then in small groups, drawn by instinct more than direction. They brought nothing with them, nothing except what they had survived. The camp formed without planning. Torn fabric became shelter. Small fires were built low to avoid drawing attention. Water was collected from streams that had not yet been poisoned by ash. No one used lights at night. No one made unnecessary noise. Survival came first. Everything else came later. No one talked about what they had lost. They didn't need to. It was in the way they moved, in the way they avoided looking at the sky, in the silence that settled between people even when they stood side by side. Fear wasn't loud. It was quiet, heavy, permanent. Colonel Sarah Vance stood at the edge of a ridge, looking down at the valley below. Even from that distance, she could see it. The glow. Entire cities reduced to smoldering scars, still burning days after the attack. The horizon flickered with distant collapses, structures finally giving in after being cut apart. She had seen war before. She had commanded troops in conflicts that most people would never hear about. None of it looked like this. This wasn't war. This was extinction. Behind her, the camp shifted. Voices whispered. People argued in low tones. Some cried when they thought no one was listening. Others sat in silence, staring at nothing, trying to process a world that no longer existed. A soldier approached her, hesitant. "We don't have enough food," he said. "Maybe a week. Water's worse. And more people keep coming." Vance didn't turn. "They will," she said. The soldier swallowed. "Then what do we do?" That was the question. The one no one wanted to ask out loud. What do you do when there is no government left? No command structure? No safe place on the planet? What do you do when the enemy doesn't negotiate, doesn't communicate, doesn't even acknowledge you? Vance turned back toward the camp. She looked at them properly, not as survivors, as people. A teacher wrapping a blanket around two children who hadn't spoken since arriving. An old man staring at his hands as if trying to remember what they were for. A group of young soldiers sitting together, their weapons untouched, their eyes empty. They weren't ready to fight. Most of them didn't even believe fighting was possible. That was the real danger. Vance stepped down into the center of the camp. Conversations faded as people noticed her. Some recognized the uniform, others didn't, but they all felt the same thing. She hadn't given up. That alone made her different. "Listen to me," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "They think we're finished." No response. A few people looked away. "They burned our cities. They broke our world. They turned everything we built into ash." She paused. "And now they've stopped." That got attention. "They stopped because they believe we're already dead." A murmur spread. "They think what's left of us will collapse on its own." She stepped forward. "They think survival is a numbers problem." Now people were watching her. Really watching. "We are still here," Vance said. Simple. Direct. "That means they were wrong." Silence. Not empty this time. Focused. A man near the front shook his head. "We can't fight them," he said. "Did you see what they did? We don't have anything. No weapons. No systems. Nothing. We don't have their weapons." Vance cut in. She didn't raise her voice, but it sharpened. "We don't have their ships. We don't have their technology." She let that settle. "But we have something they don't understand." Now no one looked away. "Before we built cities," she said slowly. "Before we had laws, before we had governments," her eyes moved across the crowd. "We survived on a world that tried to kill us every day." She took another step forward. "We learned to adapt." Another step. To hunt. Another. To endure. "We didn't become the dominant species on this planet because we were the strongest." Her voice hardened. "We became the dominant species because we refused to stop." She turned slightly, pointing toward the sky. "They see our cities and think we are soft." Her hand dropped. "They've never seen what we are without them." A young girl near the fire looked up. "How do we fight that?" she asked quietly. Vance met her eyes. We don't fight them like they expect. The words hung in the air. We stay hidden, Vance continued. We learn. We watch. Her voice dropped slightly. And when we strike, she didn't smile. We make it hurt. The wind shifted, carrying the distant hum of alien machines across the mountains. For the first time since the attack, it didn't sound unstoppable. It sounded like something that could bleed. No one cheered. No one celebrated. But something changed. The fear was still there. The grief was still there. But beneath it, something else began to grow. Not hope. Not yet. Something sharper. Something older. For the first time since the sky fell, they were not just waiting to die. They were beginning to think about fighting back. They didn't attack right away. That was the difference. That was the first real decision that separated them from what they had been before. For days, the camp stayed quiet. Fires stayed low. Movement stayed minimal. Anyone watching from above would have seen nothing more than scattered heat fading into the terrain. But beneath that silence, something was building. They started collecting. Not weapons. Information. Small teams moved out at night, slipping through forests and broken highways toward the ruins of nearby towns. They avoided open ground, avoided the sky, avoided anything that could be tracked. When drones passed overhead, they froze where they stood, barely breathing, waiting for the sound to disappear before moving again. What they brought back wasn't impressive at first. Burned supplies, damaged electronics, fragments of alien machines. But it was enough. In a cave near the rear of the camp, they built something new. A workspace. No lights beyond dim lanterns covered in cloth. No noise beyond careful movement and whispered communication. And at the center of it, Maya. She was younger than most expected. 16, maybe 17. Thin, quiet, focused. The first time anyone noticed her, she was already dismantling a Crix drone with tools she had improvised from scrap metal. No hesitation, no fear, just curiosity. At first, they tried to stop her. It could still be active, one of the soldiers warned. She didn't argue. She just looked at him and said, "It's not." Then she kept working. Now, days later, the cave was filled with pieces of alien technology laid out in careful patterns. Smooth surfaces that didn't look manufactured. Circuits that pulsed faintly without power. Components that didn't match anything human engineers understood. Maya moved through it all like she did. Colonel Vance stood at the entrance, watching. "You've been at this non-stop," she said. Maya didn't look up. "Time matters." Vance stepped closer. "That thing's safe." "No," Maya said. Then, after a pause, "But not in the way you think." Vance crouched beside her. "Explain." Maya hesitated. Not because she didn't know, because she was deciding how to say it. "It's not just a machine," she said finally. She pointed to a glowing section inside the drone. "This is a receiver." Vance nodded. "For communication?" Maya shook her head slightly. "Not exactly." She adjusted a component, and the light flickered. "It's always connected." Vance frowned. "A network?" Maya nodded. "But not like ours." She finally looked at Vance. "It doesn't just share data." A pause. "It shares decisions." That changed everything. "They don't think alone," Maya continued. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened. "Every unit, every drone, every soldier, they're all linked." Vance leaned slightly closer. "So if one sees something, they all know," Maya said. "And if one decides something?" Maya didn't answer right away. "Then, they all follow." Silence filled the cave. "They're not just coordinated," Maya added. "They're unified." Vance stood slowly. "That's how they move so perfectly," she said. Maya nodded. "Every action is calculated. Every movement planned." She tapped the broken drone lightly. "They don't guess." Vance crossed her arms. "Then how do we fight that?" Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for another component and adjusted it carefully. A faint projection flickered above the table. It wasn't clear, but it was enough. Patterns. Movement. Data. This is them, Maya said, pointing to a set of clean, precise lines. Perfect spacing. Perfect timing. Everything aligned. Then she pointed to another section. This is us. The difference was obvious. The human pattern wasn't a pattern at all. It was scattered, erratic, unpredictable. They don't understand it, Maya said. Vance narrowed her eyes. Explain. They expect resistance, Maya said. But organized resistance. Her finger moved across the chaotic display. They think pressure will force us into a pattern. She looked up. It won't. Vance felt something click. They rely on order, she said slowly. Maya nodded. Strict order. Then we break it. Maya's eyes sharpened slightly. That's the point. She adjusted the projection again. This is what they fear. Vance looked at the chaotic data. That? Maya nodded. They don't have a way to predict it. A pause. They don't even have a way to describe it. Vance's expression changed. Not softer. Sharper. So we don't fight them like an army, she said. Maya shook her head. No. We fight them like a problem they can't solve. Silence. Then, understanding. Vance turned toward the cave entrance. They think they're controlling the battlefield, she said. She looked back once. They're not. Maya watched her go. Then she looked back at the projection, at the perfect lines of the cricks, and the broken, chaotic movement of humanity. For the first time, the chaos didn't look like weakness. It looked like a weapon. They didn't choose the biggest target. They chose the one the cricks would ignore. The ruins of Denver stretched for miles. Broken concrete, twisted steel, and blackened glass fused into unnatural shapes. From orbit it looked dead. No power, no movement, no reason to care. That was why the cricks built there. A small extraction site sat in the center of the ruins, quietly stripping what remained of the region's resources. A few hundred units at most. Mostly automated systems with a thin layer of organic command overseeing the operation. Efficient, minimal, predictable. Vance studied the projection Maya had assembled. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. They run 3 patrol loops, Maya said, pointing at faint lines across the map. Each one overlaps at fixed intervals. Drones cover the outer perimeter. Ground units stay near the core. How often do they change patterns? A soldier asked. They don't, Maya replied. A pause. Not unless something forces them to. Vance nodded once. Good, she said. Her voice was calm. Then we won't give them time. The plan was simple. It had to be. They didn't have the resources for anything complicated. No air support. No advanced weapons. No second chances. What they had was unpredictability. They moved at night. Small teams left the mountains in scattered paths, never traveling in straight lines. They doubled back, split apart, rejoined, changed direction without reason. No pattern, no rhythm, nothing the cricks could map. It took 4 days to reach the outskirts of Denver. From there, they went underground. Old subway systems, maintenance tunnels, collapsed service corridors. The city beneath the city still existed. Broken, buried, but usable. They moved through it slowly, marking routes, setting supply points, learning the terrain. Above them, the cricks continued their work, unaware. They don't scan deep, Maya said quietly as she adjusted a salvage sensor. Not consistently. Too many variables. Vance looked up at the ceiling. Then we make it worse. They began digging, not with machines, with hands, with tools, with anything that could move dirt without noise. It was slow, exhausting, relentless. People worked until they collapsed. Then others took their place. No one complained. No one stopped. After 2 weeks, they were directly beneath the base. Vance gathered everyone in the largest chamber they had carved. The air was heavy, thick with dust, with sweat, with something else. Expectation. "This is not a battle," she said. "No speech. No emotion. Just truth. This is a strike." She looked at them. Really looked. "We hit fast." A pause. "We hit hard." Another. "And we don't stop." A soldier raised his hand slightly. "And if they respond?" Vance didn't hesitate. "Then we're already dead." Silence. "So we make sure they regret it." That was enough. They armed what they had. Dynamite, Molotovs, a few stolen alien weapons that might or might not work. Crude, dangerous, perfect. Maya moved through the group, handing out small devices. "Jammers," she said. "Short range. They'll disrupt coordination for a few seconds." "Seconds?" someone asked. Vance answered. "That's all we need." The charges were placed beneath key structural points. Not enough to destroy the base completely. Enough to break it. Enough to create chaos. Vance held the trigger. For a moment, everything was still. Then she pressed it. The ground above them exploded. The base shook violently as support structures collapsed. Platforms buckled. Systems fell out of alignment. Alarms triggered instantly. For the first time, the Cricks hesitated. That was the moment. The humans surged upward. They broke through the surface in multiple points at once, emerging from the ground like something that had been buried and suddenly come alive. Fire followed. Molotovs shattered against alien structures. Dynamite tore through machinery. Smoke filled the air. Jammers activated. For seconds, the network stuttered. Orders delayed. Movements desynced. Patterns broke. The Cricks fired back. Their weapons were still deadly, still precise. But now, they were reacting. And reaction was weakness. Humans pushed forward. Not in formation. Not in lines. In waves. Every step unpredictable. Every movement different. For every human that fell, two more advanced. There was no retreat. Only forward. Vance led from the front. No commands. No hesitation. A Cricks unit lunged at her. Fast, precise, calculated. She didn't follow the expected response. She stepped into the attack. The calculation failed. The blade went in. Around her, the same thing happened everywhere. Order met chaos. And broke. Minutes passed. Felt like hours. The Cricks began to fall back. Trying to regroup. Trying to restore control. Vance saw it. "They're trying to stabilize," she said. She raised her weapon. "Push." The humans surged again. The final systems collapsed under combined fire and explosions. Then, the core went. A deep pulse. A shockwave. And silence. Real silence. Vance stood in the center of the wreckage. Smoke drifting. Fire burning low. Bodies scattered. No movement. No resistance. It was over. A soldier laughed. Not joy. Disbelief. We did it." Vance looked around. At the cost. At what they had done. Then she nodded. "Yeah." Behind them, a small radio activated. A message sent across broken networks. Simple. Clear. "Denver is ours." It spread. Fast. Through static. Through whispers. Through survivors. Proof. The invaders could bleed. High above, the Cricks began to understand. Something was wrong. The system no longer matched reality. The pattern was breaking. And below, in the ruins of a dead city, humanity had just learned something important. They could win. Denver is ours. The word spread faster than any weapon. They moved through broken radios, encoded bursts, whispered transmissions carried from one survivor group to another. No official network confirmed it. No government announced it. It didn't matter. People believed it, because it was the first proof that the enemy could lose. Across the world, something changed. Groups that had been hiding began to move. Underground bunkers opened. Scattered survivors started communicating, organizing, planning. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't need them anymore. Hope wasn't what drove them. Proof did. The Cricks noticed. At first, it appeared as minor disruptions, small failures in ground operations, patrol units going silent, extraction sites losing contact. Their system flagged it as noise. Then the noise repeated. Then it spread. Entire zones began to collapse in ways that didn't follow prediction models. Units disappeared without clear cause. Signals returned corrupted. Patterns broke. The Cricks network responded perfectly. More oversight, more control, more structure. And it made things worse. Because every time they tightened their system, humans broke it again. Attacks came without pattern, without logic, without consistency. Small groups would strike and vanish. Others would expose themselves just to lure Cricks units into traps. Some attacks didn't even aim to win. They aimed to confuse, to disrupt, to overload. For a species built on perfect order, it was destabilizing. Deep beneath the Ural Mountains, another war had begun. Quieter one. Hidden facilities that had survived the attack came back to life. Old research bunkers, sealed military complexes, forgotten industrial zones. Scientists gathered, not because they were told to, because they understood. They brought knowledge, physics, engineering, materials science, fragments of alien technology. And they started building. They called it the Bastion Project. It wasn't one weapon. It wasn't one system. It was a shift in thinking. If we can't match them, one engineer said, holding a dismantled alien component, then we outlast them. Human technology changed overnight. Before the invasion, everything had been built for efficiency. Clean, optimized, precise. Now, everything was built for survival. Ships were designed with thick layers of steel and lead instead of fragile energy shields. Weapons weren't made for accuracy. They were made for impact. Systems were built with redundancy upon redundancy. If one failed, another took over. They didn't build to avoid damage. They built to keep fighting after it. Ugly, heavy, brutal, effective. At the center of it all, General Marcus Thorne. He hadn't been appointed. He hadn't been elected. He had simply taken command. Because someone had to. He stood in a dark command chamber, staring at a projection of Earth and the surrounding orbital space. Cricks fleet positions, human resistance zones, launch sites, new markers, hidden silos, deep underground, scattered across continents. They still think we're ground-bound, an officer said. Thorne nodded slightly. Of course they do. To the Cricks, the war was already over. Everything happening now was just cleanup. Thorne looked at the alien ships hanging in orbit. They don't see us as a threat, he said. The officer beside him hesitated. No, sir. Thorne's expression didn't change. Good. He stepped forward. Then let's keep it that way. Across the planet, hidden systems activated. In the deserts of Australia, massive sealed doors began to open. In the plains of Kansas, entire sections of land shifted, revealing structures buried deep beneath the surface. In frozen Siberia, ice cracked as ancient launch systems powered up for the first time in decades. No signals, no warnings, just movement. Back in the mountains, Vance received a transmission. Short, encrypted. Stand by. She looked up at the sky, still filled with alien ships, still watching. Something was coming. She could feel it. In orbit, the Cricks network registered it. A sudden spike in energy signatures. From the surface. Thousands of them. Simultaneous. Impossible. The system recalculated, adjusted, prepared to respond. But for the first time, it was too slow. Because the ground wasn't quiet anymore. The ground was opening. And humanity was rising. The ground did not open quietly. Tore apart. Across continents, hidden silos erupted from beneath the surface. Steel doors blown outward. Earth splitting as massive structures forced their way into the sky. Dust clouds rose like storms. Rock shattered. Entire sections of land collapsed inward as something far larger than anything the Cricks had predicted began to emerge. Ships, thousands of them, not sleek, not elegant, weapons. They rose unevenly, engines roaring, metal grinding under stress. Some tilted before stabilizing. Others surged upward with raw force, tearing through the atmosphere instead of gliding. From orbit, the difference was obvious. Crick's ships floated like perfect machines. Human ships climbed like they were fighting gravity itself. The Cricks reacted instantly. Their network recalculated trajectories, adjusted formations, and locked targets with flawless precision. Defensive lines shifted. Weapons charged. From their perspective, the outcome was simple. Unshielded vessels. Irregular movement. Primitive construction. Total elimination within minutes. They fired. Beams of white-hot energy lanced downward through the atmosphere, striking the rising ironclads with surgical accuracy. Armor melted. Hulls cracked open. One ship broke apart mid-ascent, its core detonating in a violent flash that scattered debris across the sky. The calculations held. First. Then something changed. The human ships didn't evade. They didn't scatter. They didn't retreat. They kept coming. Inside one of the lead vessels, alarms screamed. Panels sparked. The outer hull temperature warnings flashed beyond safe limits. The pilot didn't pull back. Didn't hesitate. He pushed the controls forward. "Hold together," he muttered. Not to the ship. To himself. On the command deck of the dreadnought Earth, General Thorne watched the battlefield unfold. Red markers blinked out as ships were destroyed. Blue markers pushed forward. Losses were heavy. Expected. "Maintain trajectory," Thorne said. An officer hesitated. "Sir, we're taking critical." "I know." His voice didn't rise. "Keep them moving." This was never about survival. It was about impact. The first ironclads broke through the upper atmosphere. Then they accelerated. Straight toward the Cricks fleet. Targeting systems adjusted. More beams fired. More ships burned. But the distance closed too fast. Something didn't match the calculations. The human ships weren't maneuvering to engage. They were aiming to collide. The first impact shattered the illusion of control. A human ironclad slammed into a Cricks vessel at full speed. No warning. No defense. The alien ship buckled under the force, its perfect structure collapsing inward as thousands of tons of steel drove through it. Then, the core ruptured. The explosion tore both ships apart. For a fraction of a second, the Cricks network stalled. This was not a recognized tactic. This was not efficient. This was not logical. Then it happened again. And again. Damaged human ships redirected at the last moment, turning themselves into weapons. Some exploded on impact. Others punched through multiple targets before breaking apart. The battlefield dissolved. Cricks formations, built on precision and spacing, collapsed under the pressure. Ships moved too close, too fast, too unpredictably. Human vessels surged into the gaps. Not to flank, not to outmaneuver, to get closer, to make the fight chaotic. "Boarding pods ready," an officer called. Thorne nodded. "Deploy." From the sides of larger ships, pods launched, small, armored, fast. They didn't slow. They slammed into alien hulls. Magnetic clamps locked. Cutting charges ignited. Metal burned. Inside, silence. Then the hatches blew open. Human soldiers stepped into alien ships. The interiors were clean, ordered, perfect. That lasted seconds. Gunfire echoed through narrow corridors. Shotguns roared in confined spaces. Blades struck where alien armor was weakest. The Cricks were fast, precise, but they relied on coordination. In tight spaces, that advantage vanished. Humans didn't wait for signals, didn't follow patterns. They reacted. A Cricks unit lunged, calculating speed, angle, outcome. The human didn't step back. He stepped forward. The calculation failed. Across multiple ships, the same thing repeated. Boarding teams moved deeper, not to control, to destroy. At the center of the battlefield, the Krik's flagship, Time Star Eater. Massive, untouched, commanding, until it wasn't. Boarding pods struck its hull in waves, hundreds of them. Inside, Sarah Vance led the advance. Her armor was damaged, burned, scratched, but she kept moving. No commands, no hesitation. Forward. Always forward. They reached the core chamber, a glowing structure pulsing with controlled energy. Perfect. Stable. Vance raised her weapon. For Earth. No countdown. She fired. The explosion tore through the flagship. From orbit, it looked like a second sun. Then, nothing. Silence. The Krik's fleet froze. Then broke. Not strategically. Not in formation. They retreated. Ships jumped to hyperspace without coordination, abandoning positions instantly. The network reached its conclusion. This environment was no longer controllable. On the command deck, Thorn watched the last enemy ship vanish. No celebration, no relief. "They'll come back," he said. The room went still. "Next time," he continued, "they won't underestimate us." He turned away from the display. Good. Below on Earth, people looked up at a sky finally empty. Sunlight returned, but it didn't feel like peace, because everyone understood the truth. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And now, the sky was clear again. For the first time in weeks, sunlight touched the surface of Earth without being filtered through alien shadows. Fire still burned across continents, and entire cities remained nothing more than blackened scars. But the silence above felt different. Not safe. Just empty. People stepped out from hiding. Slowly, carefully. They looked up, expecting the sky to fill again at any moment. Didn't. But no one celebrated. Because deep down, everyone understood the same truth. The enemy had not been destroyed. They had only left. In orbit, the debris field told the real story. Fragments of human ships drifted beside shattered alien vessels. Twisted metal, broken hulls, frozen wreckage. Silent proof of what had happened. Recovery teams moved through it immediately. No pause. No mourning. Anything that still functioned was taken. Anything that could be studied was brought back. "Take everything," Thorn ordered. "We're not leaving them anything we can use." Back on Earth, the transformation accelerated. There were no more countries, no more borders, no more arguments. Only purpose. Factories rose from ruins. Old industrial zones were rebuilt into continuous production centers. People worked without being told. Children sorted scrap. Engineers dismantled alien technology piece by piece. Everything fed into one system. War. It wasn't forced. It didn't need to be. Everyone had seen what happened when humanity was weak. They would not be weak again. Deep beneath the surface, the Bastion project evolved. Captured Krik's technology was torn apart and rebuilt. Not clean, not efficient, but durable. Redundant. Relentless. Human designs changed. Ships became heavier. Armor thicker. Systems layered over systems. They didn't build to avoid destruction anymore. They built to survive it. At the center of it all stood General Marcus Thorn. He hadn't been chosen. He had simply become necessary. He stood in the command chamber, staring at a projection of something new. Coordinates. Recovered from the destroyed flagship. At first, it had been fragments, then patterns, then something clear enough to understand. Krik's territory. Their systems. Their routes. Their empire. An officer spoke carefully. "Sir, this leads directly into their space." Thorn didn't look away. "I know." Silence followed, because everyone understood what that meant. "They came here to erase us," Thorn said. His voice stayed calm. "They failed." He zoomed in on a cluster of systems, dense with activity. Shipyards, fuel stations, production worlds. Now we decide what happens next. Across the planet, the Retribution fleet began to form. Thousands of ships. Bigger than before. Stronger. Still ugly. Still human. They didn't assemble in clean lines. They gathered like pressure. Like something building. In the mountains, Sarah Vance stood watching the launches. Ships rose into the sky, heavier, darker, built for something beyond defense. Maya stood beside her. "They'll come back," Maya said. Vance didn't look away. "I know." Maya crossed her arms. "So we wait." Vance shook her head. "No." That one word carried everything. "We're done waiting." Maya looked at her. "So we go to them." Not a question. Vance nodded. "They made it a war." A pause. "We decide how it ends." Back on the command deck, Thorne faced his officers. "We are not defending Earth anymore." No hesitation. "We are ending the threat." The room went still. An officer spoke. "Sir, do we issue a warning?" Thorne's eyes hardened slightly. "Did they?" No one answered. "Prepare the fleet." The jump wasn't smooth. Human ships didn't glide into hyperspace. They forced their way through. Reality seemed to tear as thousands of vessels disappeared from Earth orbit and reappeared deep inside enemy territory. The first target came into view. A massive industrial world. Crix Prime 4. Shipyards stretched across orbit, building the same silver vessels that had once burned Earth. Thousands of workers. Thousands of machines. Everything running in perfect order. Until it wasn't. Human ships appeared without warning. No formation. No signal. No hesitation. "Fire," Thorne said. The first strike wasn't energy. It was mass. Tungsten projectiles slammed into the shipyards at near-light speed, tearing through structures before defenses could react. Entire sections vanished instantly. Explosions lit the planet below. Then came everything else. Missiles, kinetic rounds, boarding pods. Humans didn't target just defenses. They targeted everything. Production lines, fuel reserves, transport systems, anything that made the Crix strong. Within minutes, the shipyards were gone. Reduced to drifting debris, burning fragments. Human ships didn't stop, didn't occupy, didn't claim. They moved on. Back in the wider galaxy, something changed. Other species had watched the Crix for centuries, feared them, avoided them. Now they watched something else. A species that didn't warn, didn't negotiate, didn't stop. Stories began to spread. About humans. About what they had become. And for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy felt afraid of something new. Knew how to reach the stars. The sky was clear again. For the first time in weeks, sunlight touched the surface of Earth without being filtered through alien shadows. Fire still burned across continents, and entire cities remained nothing more than blackened scars. But the silence above felt different. Not safe. Just empty. People stepped out from hiding. Slowly, carefully. They looked up, expecting the sky to fill again at any moment. Didn't. But no one celebrated. Because deep down, everyone understood the same truth. The enemy had not been destroyed. They had only left. In orbit, the debris field told the real story. Fragments of human ships drifted beside shattered alien vessels. Twisted metal, broken hulls, frozen wreckage. Silent proof of what had happened. Recovery teams moved through it immediately. No pause. No mourning. Anything that still functioned was taken. Anything that could be studied was brought back. "Take everything," Thorne ordered. "We're not leaving them anything we can use." Back on Earth, the transformation accelerated. There were no more countries, no more borders, no more arguments. Only purpose. Factories rose from ruins. Old industrial zones were rebuilt into continuous production centers. People worked without being told. Children sorted scrap. Engineers dismantled alien technology piece by piece. Everything fed into one system. War. It wasn't forced. It didn't need to be. Everyone had seen what happened when humanity was weak. They would not be weak again. Deep beneath the surface, the Bastion project evolved. Captured Crick's technology was torn apart and rebuilt. Not clean, not efficient, but durable. Redundant. Relentless. Human designs changed. Ships became heavier. Armor thicker. Systems layered over systems. They didn't build to avoid destruction anymore. They built to survive it. At the center of it all stood General Marcus Thorne. He hadn't been chosen. He had simply become necessary. He stood in the command chamber, staring at a projection of something new. Coordinates. Recovered from the destroyed flagship. At first, it had been fragments, then patterns, then something clear enough to understand. Crick's territory. Their systems. Their routes. Their empire. An officer spoke carefully. "Sir, this leads directly into their space." Thorne didn't look away. "I know." Silence followed, because everyone understood what that meant. "They came here to erase us," Thorne said. His voice stayed calm. "They failed." He zoomed in on a cluster of systems, dense with activity. Shipyards, fuel stations, production worlds. "Now we decide what happens next." Across the planet, the Retribution fleet began to form. Thousands of ships. Bigger than before. Stronger. Still ugly. Still human. They didn't assemble in clean lines. They gathered like pressure. Like something building. In the mountains, Sarah Vance stood watching the launches. Ships rose into the sky, heavier, darker, built for something beyond defense. Maya stood beside her. "They'll come back," Maya said. Vance didn't look away. "I know." Maya crossed her arms. "So we wait." Vance shook her head. "No." That one word carried everything. "We're done waiting." Maya looked at her. "So we go to them." Not a question. Vance nodded. "They made it a war." A pause. "We decide how it ends." Back on the command deck, Thorne faced his officers. "We are not defending Earth anymore. No hesitation. We are ending the threat." The room went still. An officer spoke. "Sir, do we issue a warning?" Thorne's eyes hardened slightly. "Did they?" No one answered. "Prepare the fleet." The jump wasn't smooth. Human ships didn't glide into hyperspace. They forced their way through. Reality seemed to tear as thousands of vessels disappeared from Earth orbit and reappeared deep inside enemy territory. The first target came into view. A massive industrial world. Crick's Prime 4. Shipyards stretched across orbit, building the same silver vessels that had once burned Earth. Thousands of workers. Thousands of machines. Everything running in perfect order. Until it wasn't. Human ships appeared without warning. No formation. No signal. No hesitation. "Fire," Thorne said. The first strike wasn't energy. It was mass. Tungsten projectiles slammed into the shipyards at near-light speed, tearing through structures before defenses could react. Entire sections vanished instantly. Explosions lit the planet below. Then came everything else. Missiles. Kinetic rounds. Boarding pods. Humans didn't target just defenses. They targeted everything. Production lines. Fuel reserves. Transport systems. Anything that made the Crick strong. Within minutes, the shipyards were gone. Reduced to drifting debris. Burning fragments. Human ships didn't stop. Didn't occupy. Didn't claim. They moved on. Back in the wider galaxy, something changed. Other species had watched the Cricks for centuries. Feared them. Avoided them. Now they watched something else. A species that didn't warn. Didn't negotiate. Didn't stop. Stories began to spread. About humans. About what they had become. And for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy felt afraid of something new. The second strike came before the first had even finished burning. Human ships moved through Crick space like a storm with no center, appearing, striking, disappearing, then reappearing somewhere else before the damage could even be measured. Fuel depots vanished. Trade routes collapsed. Communication relays went dark one after another. The Crick's empire, which had held its structure for thousands of years, began to fracture in weeks. For the first time in their history, they were reacting, and they were losing. Across the galaxy, the other races watched, at first in silence, then in fear. The Cricks had always been a problem, controlled one, a managed one. But this was something else. An empire wasn't just being defeated, it was being erased. The Galactic Council called an emergency assembly. For once, there was no order in the chamber. Voices overlapped. Arguments broke apart before they could finish. No one agreed on what to do. They cannot be allowed to continue, one representative said sharply. If they destroy the Cricks, they won't stop there. They were attacked, another responded. This is retaliation. This is annihilation. Silence followed that word, because no one could deny it. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Era. She had seen the humans, not just on screens, but close. She stepped forward. They won't respond to threats, she said. The room quieted slightly. They won't negotiate from fear, she continued. And they are not afraid. A Drax representative leaned forward. Then what do you suggest? Era didn't hesitate. We stand in their way. The room froze, because everyone understood what that meant. The fleet they assembled was the largest in Council history. Thousands of ships, dozens of species, each one bringing their strongest vessels, their most advanced weapons, their best commanders. They didn't love the Cricks, but they feared what would replace them. A species that had already proven could not be controlled. The interception point was chosen carefully, a system along the path of the Retribution fleet, a place where they could stop them, or try. When the humans arrived, they didn't slow. They emerged from hyperspace violently, filling space with raw presence instead of perfect formation. Then they saw it. A wall. Ships stretched across the system in layered defensive lines. Energy grids overlapping. Weapons charged. Waiting. On the bridge of the Earth, silence fell. Full Council fleet, an officer said. They're blocking the route. A transmission came through. Clean. Precise. Era's voice. General Thorn, she said. You have defended your world. You have taken your revenge. The Crick's empire is already collapsing. A pause. This must end. Thorn didn't answer immediately. He watched the fleet ahead, perfectly aligned, perfectly controlled, just like the Cricks. Why now? He asked. Silence. Then, because if you continue, Era said, there will be nothing left to stop you. Thorn's expression didn't change. They didn't stop them, he said quietly. When our world burned. A pause. We were observing, Era replied carefully. Thorn cut her off. You were watching. Silence filled the channel. It is different now, Era said. No, Thorn replied. It's exactly the same. The connection remained open. No one spoke. Then Thorn stepped closer to the command console. They think this is about balance, he said. No one interrupted. They think if they put enough ships in front of us. A pause. We'll turn back. He looked at his officers. They still don't understand. Signal the fleet. An officer hesitated. Sir, if we advance. They'll fire. Thorn didn't look away. I know. A breath. Send it. Across thousands of human ships, a single command spread. Advance. No formation change. No hesitation. Forward. The Council fleet reacted instantly. Warning shots fired. Controlled. Precise. Several human ships were destroyed. The rest kept moving. They're not stopping, an officer whispered. Thorn's voice was calm. They never were. Commence. The space between the fleets exploded. Council ships fired in perfect coordination. Human ships pushed directly into it. Armor burned. Hull breaches opened. Ships were torn apart. Still, they advanced. Then the humans fired back. Not in patterns. Not in waves. Everything at once. Missiles cutting through space unpredictably. Kinetic rounds launched without timing. Boarding pods striking without warning. It wasn't strategy. It was pressure. Constant. Relentless. Overwhelming. Council formations began to break. Not from weakness. From uncertainty. They had trained for war. They had not trained for this. A Luma ship attempted to retreat. A human destroyer accelerated toward it. Impact. Both gone. Across the battlefield, the same moment repeated. Council pilots hesitated. For the first time. And hesitation was defeat. "We are not fighting soldiers," a Drax commander transmitted before his signal cut. "We are fighting something that does not stop." At the center of the chaos, a smaller human ship broke through. Not toward the Crix. Toward the Council command station. Inside, Sarah Vance stood at the front of the drop team. "Hold steady." The ship shook violently under fire. The docking bay came into view. 3. No one braced. 2. They leaned forward. 1. Impact. The ship tore into the station. Smoke filled the interior. The ramp dropped, and the humans stepped out. Not as negotiators. Not as soldiers. As something else. Something the galaxy had never faced before. And they moved straight toward the heart of it. Crixia looked like perfection. From orbit, it shone like a jewel, golden cities rising in elegant curves, oceans reflecting starlight, structures built with a precision that spoke of a species that had never known disorder, a world untouched by chaos, a world that had only ever watched others burn. The Retribution fleet arrived without warning. Thousands of human ships dropped into orbit, filling the sky in layers until the planet below was cast into shadow. No transmission, no demand, no hesitation. Then every screen on the planet activated. Homes, factories, public networks, private systems, all overridden. A single image appeared. Earth, burned, scarred, broken. Below it, in the Crix language, "We remember you." Panic followed instantly. The Crix had never been invaded, never been hunted, never been forced to react. Now they were the ones looking up. Ships attempted to launch from the surface. Some made it, most didn't. Human interceptors cut them down before they cleared the atmosphere. There was nowhere to run. On the bridge of the Earth, Thorn watched everything unfold. "Minimal defenses," an officer reported. They weren't prepared for direct assault. Of course they weren't. They had never needed to be. "Hold fire," Thorn said. The room shifted. "Sir, we don't burn it." Confusion. "This isn't about destruction," Thorn continued. "It's about ending them." Dropships began to deploy. Not bombs, not missiles. People. Thousands of troop carriers descended through the atmosphere. Not chaotic, not reckless. Controlled. Human. The first boots touched the surface in silence. Cities that had never known war stood open and exposed. Civilians filled the streets. Frozen, uncertain, unable to process what was happening. The humans did not rush. They did not shout. They moved forward with calm precision. That was what terrified the Crix most. Not rage. Control. General Thorn stepped onto the surface of Crixia. He didn't wear a helmet. He wanted to breathe the air of the world that had tried to erase his. Behind him, human forces spread out. No resistance. No defense. Only fear. Deep underground, the Crix leadership gathered in their final bunker. They had never built it for war. Now it was all they had left. "Send the message," one of them said. "What do we offer?" "Everything." The transmission reached Thorn quickly. Total surrender. Technology. Resources. Worlds. Anything. Everything. In exchange for survival. Thorn read it once. Then handed it back. Reply, he said. The officer hesitated. Terms? Thorn shook his head. No terms. He looked out at the city. We didn't come for their future. The response was sent. Short. Final. We came for your memory. The order went out. Not to destroy. To erase. Across Crixia, human forces began dismantling everything that defined the Crix Empire. Monuments were taken down. Statues shattered. Archives wiped. Libraries destroyed. Every symbol. Every record. Every trace of identity. Gone. At first, the Crix didn't understand. They expected death. This was worse. Sarah Vance stood in a plaza as a massive monument collapsed behind her. Crix nobles were brought before her. They trembled. You built an empire on fear, she said calmly. No anger. No emotion. You thought it would last forever. She gestured to the ruins. It doesn't. One of them tried to speak. She stopped him. You wanted us to be animals. A pause. Now you'll learn what that means. Transport ships filled. Not with soldiers. With Crix. Millions. They were not taken to camps. They were taken to the edge of the galaxy. A dead world. Cold. Empty. A beginning. Back on Crixia, the silence grew. Day by day, the planet lost everything. Its history, its pride, its identity, until nothing remained. Not a civilization, just a place. When it was over, Thorn stood in what had once been the center of their empire. Now, nothing. Era arrived. Quiet. You've won, she said. The Crix are gone. Is this enough? Thorn didn't answer immediately. We were not like this, he said finally. Era stayed silent. You watched while they changed us. He turned toward her. Now you're asking if we can change back. Silence. We don't want your worlds, he said. We don't want your power. A pause. But if anyone ever does this again. His voice lowered. We won't stop at this. Era understood. Not fear. Finality. The fleet began to leave. One by one. Then in waves. Until the sky was empty again. They left behind a dead world. Not destroyed. Forgotten. And across the galaxy, the message spread. Clear. Unavoidable. Humanity did not conquer. Humanity ended things. The war ended. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was control. For a long time, the galaxy held its breath. No fleets moved near human space. No signals crossed the Terran border without permission. No empire dared to test what had just been proven. Earth changed. Not back to what it had been. Into something new. Cities were not rebuilt the same way. Concrete towers were replaced with structures that blended into nature, floating gardens, underground habitats, self-sustaining ecosystems. Energy was no longer a problem. Resources were no longer a limitation. Humanity could have become anything. They chose not to expand. That was what terrified the galaxy the most. They didn't build an empire. They didn't demand tribute. They didn't claim territory. They simply watched. For 500 years, no one challenged them. The name human became something else. Not just a species. A warning. Parents on distant worlds used it to silence their children. Leaders spoke it carefully. Historians wrote about it like a natural disaster. Because everyone remembered what happened to the Crix. And no one wanted to become the next memory. But time changes everything. New generations rose. Leaders who had never seen the war. Who only knew humanity as a story, a myth. One species in particular chose to test it. The Vorch. A race of metallic beings who believed they had surpassed all others. Their leader, Kalen, looked at human space and saw something different. Not fear. opportunity. They're gone, he said. Or weak. He sent a single mining ship across the Terran border. No response. 3 days passed. Nothing happened. The Vorch celebrated. Then, on the 4th day, the ship vanished. No explosion. No signal. No debris. It simply stopped existing. Kalen didn't fear it. He got angry. He sent 10 warships. Then 100. Then his entire fleet. 20,000 ships. He wanted to prove the myth was dead. He was about to prove something else. At the edge of human space, they found it. A single ship. Dark. Silent. It didn't reflect light. It absorbed it. No visible weapons. No visible engines. Just presence. The Vorch commander transmitted. Leave or be destroyed. The response came back as a sound. A heartbeat. Slow. Steady. Then, the ship moved. Not flying. Shifting. Appearing in one position. Then another. The Vorch fired. Plasma beams that could melt moons. They hit the ship. And vanished. Absorbed. Then the human ship blinked. And appeared in the center of the Vorch formation. A wave of invisible force expanded outward. The Vorch ships didn't explode. They dissolved. Metal turned to dust. Structures collapsed into nothing. Within seconds, the fleet was gone. The human ship didn't stay. It disappeared. Like it had never been there. The message spread instantly. The myth was real. Kalen refused to accept it. He launched everything. A full invasion. 20,000 ships moved toward Earth. He believed numbers would win. He believed power would matter. He was wrong. Near Saturn, they saw nothing. Empty space. Then the moons moved. Their surfaces shifted, revealing massive hidden structures. Lenses. Weapons. The sun itself bent through them. A beam of pure light struck the fleet. 5,000 ships. Gone in an instant. Panic broke formation. Then the dark ships appeared. Hundreds of them. They didn't fire. They pulled. Gravity warped. Ships crushed into each other. Steel folded like paper. The fleet collapsed. Within minutes, nothing remained. Kalen's flagship was the last. A single human transport docked with it. One person stepped out. A woman in an old uniform. A relic from another time. She looked at him. "We gave you 500 years of peace," she said. Her voice was calm. Worse than anger. "Did you think we forgot?" She didn't kill him. She gave him a device. "Go back," she said. "Tell them." The fleet was gone. The message was clear. The silence was over. After that, everything changed. Humanity did not retreat. They became something else. They built stations across the galaxy. At every major jump point. Watching. Waiting. They called them Eyes of Terror. Unmanned. Controlled by systems no one could understand. If a war began, the Eyes would act. If a species threatened extinction, the Eyes would respond. If anything tried to rise like the Cricks, the dark ships would come. The galaxy no longer needed armies. It had something else. A force that could not be negotiated with, could not be bribed, could not be stopped. The Galactic Council changed. Not into rulers, into survivors. "We spent millions of years trying to create peace," Era said in her final address. "The humans created it in one war. Back on Earth, life became quiet again. Beautiful, peaceful, but never soft. Every year, on the day the sky fell, the entire planet went silent. For 1 hour. No movement, no sound, just memory. Because that memory was their power. And in the deep dark of space, beyond the edge of the galaxy, something else was watching. Something ancient, something hungry. A signal came. A warning. A species that consumed entire galaxies. moving toward the Milky Way. The council panicked. They sent a message to Earth. We are going to die. The response came instantly. We know. Pause. Stay behind us. At the edge of the galaxy, the human fleet waited. Not thousands. Millions. They had been preparing. For something worse. The devourers arrived. A wall of living ships. Teeth. Claws. Hunger. They expected prey. They found something else. The humans fired. Weapons that bent space. That tore reality. That erased matter. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, nothing remained. Not even a trace. The humans didn't celebrate. They returned to their stations. Watched. Waited. And the galaxy finally understood. Humanity was not just powerful. Not just dangerous. They were necessary. They were the reason the stars were quiet. The reason the weak survived. The reason the galaxy endured. And even after thousands of years, when the word human was spoken, it still carried the same meaning. Fear. Respect. And something deeper. Relief. Because as long as humanity existed, the darkness would always have something to fear.